What should you play after Baldur's Gate 3? Baldur's Gate 3 just hit Steam, and it's already one of the biggest hits of 2023. In fact, it has one of the highest Metacritic rating scores of all time. Wow. Larian have achieved so much here. The unique and extensive customization options, the freedom of choice, especially the weird romantic ones, and the beautiful portrayal of this world has many other game developers sweating. They don't want this to become the new standard that fans expect. Baldur's Gate 3 is the RPG that fans have been hoping for. But if you've already finished the game, with all 17,000 of its possible endings, and you're already craving more, here's our suggestion of the next great games you can play to scratch that itch. Let's get the obvious choice out of the way first. Divinity Original Sin 2. This is the last game from the developers of Baldur's Gate 3, Larian Studio, and it's very, very similar. The big key difference here is that they didn't have the official Dungeons & Dragons license, and so they don't have the same name for the spells or the same name for the races. But Divinity Original Sin 2 was heavily inspired by D&D, so it's gonna feel like playing a very similar game to Baldur's Gate 3, but just with a few different names for spells and a few different smaller rules around the edge.
Same, but different.
By and large, the overall experience is going to be very, very similar. And it's a great experience. Divinity Original Sin 2 was still made with a fairly significant budget. It's still quite well polished, even if not quite as much as Baldur's Gate 3. And many of the same devs who have currently given us Baldur's Gate 3 were working at Larian at the time Divinity Original Sin 2 was released. So what you're getting here is the closest experience to BG3. But this is the obvious suggestion, so let's move on to a couple of others. If you want the next game to have different mechanics, but you did enjoy the party system in Baldur's Gate 3, then you might want to check out the Dragon Age series. So far, there are 3 games out, with another one currently in development. And hey, with that new game, there are even former developers involved that worked on previous Baldur's Gate titles. So, if you can wait a little, that one totally makes sense. But if you want one now, the most recent Dragon Age game is not that old, and it won't feel dated to modern gamers. What really reminded us of Dragon Age while playing Baldur's Gate 3 was the way that you interact with your party and the depth of the choices you make, especially when it concerns having multiple romantic options. Now, you might not be able to bone a bear, but you can do the dirty with a witch that can turn into a gigantic spider. So it kind of checks out. And Dragon Age will also give you a very similar feeling to Baldur's Gate 3 in that your choices matter. You have impact on this world depending on what you choose for your character and your party. So if you enjoyed the party system in Baldur's Gate 3 and the pathing of the narrative that made you feel like your choices had impact, the Dragon Age series could be for you. And obviously we kind of have to include D&D. Yep, the tabletop RPG. This is perfect if your internet crashes or if you just have some friends over and you want to play together. There's really not much to say here. Baldur's Gate 3 is basically a D&D sim. These games have nearly identical rules when it comes down to combat and the various classes.
They're the same picture.
In fact, it's even set in the same world, in Faerun. Those were our picks for games you should check out if you enjoyed Baldur's Gate 3 and you're craving some more.